always felt like even in college, I was always speaking and talking about these issues to my coaches and bringing them up. And I always felt like because I was bringing these things up, I always felt a sense of like I was being ostracized because, I was starting to break down the mask, the mask of just being a player, the mask of just being a product, but really breaking down into me just being a human being and wanting to reflect on what does violence mean to me? What does death mean to me? What does humanity mean to me? I don't think there's really much new about African-American males and women being killed in America. I think historically, it's always been some type of trauma for African-American people on the soil of America from the beginning of being here. There's been a traumatic experience. And so I think Black people around the country, we kind of are used to the violence that's been happening to us. We don't want the violence, and we've been fighting for equality and fighting for the right to exist and to be protected underneath the law of the government. But I think the only thing that is shaping this, making us have this formula is social media. I think social media is kind of the new catalyst for everybody to know what's happening at once, and I think with social media, it allows people to see things. And I think the outrage of a man losing his life and asking for his mother and asking for his child to reclaim his humanity is seen on social media. And I think it's just brought another side of humanity to people who haven't been listening, who haven't been watching, who haven't seen the violence, who don't understand what's happening to these families on a daily basis.
Yeah, I think what's different maybe is that a different audience is paying attention to it. Being a historian of this stuff, I know I can think of protests against police mistreatment and murder of African Americans going back to the 1920s at least. But now that it's filmed, more people are believing it. There are a lot of people jumping on the bandwagon right now, including, the commissioner of the NFL. You've been speaking about that. What do you make of these come-latelys to the conversation?
It's very hard to stomach a little bit because there's been so much time in between the first protest and now, 4 years since the first time that, Colin Kaepernick took a knee and brought these issues up, right? And between those 4 years, there's been a lot of lives lost. There's been a lot of time missed. As human beings, you just wonder, like, how much could we have changed? How much how much impact could we have made? What could we have done better? And I think what could the NFL have done better? And I just look at this and the commissioner and everything that they talk about, even though now they're getting onto it. And I think because now it's socially acceptable to have a radical idea now. Before, to have a radical idea, you were kind of an outlier. You were kind of like standing alone in this open farm, you know what I'm saying? But now everybody's there because now companies are buying into it. Everybody is seeing the importance of Black lives. The thing that I worry about is the intent. What is truly the intent? Is the intent to show that I'm not a racist, or is the intent to change the trajectory of African Americans' lives in society?
One of our participants had a question about what advice you have for celebrities or athletes who want to use their voice or their platform, but they're not sure exactly how.
Oh, I think it's important to understand the risk of speaking out, because I think sometimes not understanding the risk or what you're doing, it will, when the backlash comes, it'll be overwhelming. But I think if you understand the risk and the importance of using your voice and having yourself be a part of something bigger than just your oneself as a collective, I think standing up and using your voice, and if you don't know how, I think it's important to research. I think research is super important because you're going to have to answer questions, and you're going to want to be able to have a rebuttal when somebody asks you something, and you got to be able to say some of the numbers and be able to talk about the historical context of what's happening. So being able to find somebody who can mentor you, if you're a celebrity, there's so many people out there, there's organizations, you don't have to recreate the wheel. You are able to go out And being a celebrity, you can ask for help, and people will show you and guide you into the right way. There's a certain amount of fear with that, but at the same time, there's a certain amount of righteousness too with that, to be able to really shed yourself and your selfish self to be able to think of the whole and think about your children's children and their cousins and their friends. And what does this America look like when you can undo your ego?
So when you joined with Colin Kaepernick in protesting the national anthem in the NFL, the backlash, well, expressions of support were prominent and pronounced and national. The backlash was also fierce, fanned by the president, for example. One of our participants, wants to know what that experience was like. What did you learn from speaking out for the first time on that national stage?
I've been talking about stuff for a long period of time. I think slowly America pays attention to what it wants to pay attention to, and I think slowly America started to listen to the players. I think players have been saying stuff slowly about Black Lives Matter, because I think Black Lives Matter was kind of was along our evolution too, as athletes were coming to their consciousness about the importance of using their voice. I think I learned that there's a lot of backlash that comes with having a voice. I think I also learned that being in these leagues weren't ready to have that talk about the importance of humanity. I think profit shares are shared so much about the celebrity and the way that the athlete performs, and it's not so much about his voice or his opinion about society. It's more about how much can he sell and what can he do for this organization. So I learned that there's a lot of limitations to the ability to be able to speak on true issues, because everybody was really scared to touch those things, because society wasn't really ready for athletes to continue on the tradition of saying what is true, saying what is right, and standing up on their beliefs. I've learned that a lot of people aren't expecting athletes to have that voice, and I think I learned that a lot of people want you to be quiet. I learned that a lot of people don't want you to be a voice for the people, because when you use your platform at this level, we're talking about in the society with social media, is so big. Like, people have 125 million followers, bigger than certain countries and around the world. So to be able to have athletes have a collective voice, I felt like that was something that a lot of leagues and teams didn't want to have. I think it's about us exercising ourselves to stand up and get up. I think a lot of times we become like so attached to social media and attached to doing these things, and we're just kind of putting our foot barely in. And I think for us to make the change that we want to need, I think it requires us to fully dive in. Once the people in the whole country, and the people don't see that it's a divided system, like when they just see men screaming, and then they're like, well, it's just a man's problem. But when women are screaming too, and Black people are screaming, and Hispanic people are screaming, white people are screaming, they understand that this is a problem about humanity. So I think it's important through that hope and that connection that you are able to build bridges with other people who have the same ideology with you, and those who don't, that you can bring along.
I'm pretty inspired, I must say, by the breadth and diversity of this movement as it's emerging. Police brutality and racism isn't a problem that dates back to the very foundation of policing, as was entwined with slave catching and conquest of Native people. A lot of organizations are speaking out suddenly. Even Republicans, and some of them, are feeling compelled to at least make lip service to police reform. So there's some unity that Trump is maybe inadvertently forging among people in indignation at his white supremacy. And as you were saying when we were chatting the other day, that means if this is an opening, it means the movement might have a chance to get some real changes. What do you think the movement might achieve now and should demand?
I think we're more looking to something where it's more restorative justice and finding ways to police our communities in a way that doesn't end up in death, but where people feel safe enough to. Back in the day, in those movies and cartoons where white people used to stop and ask the cop, "Oh, I'm lost and I need you to give me directions," where you feel as a citizen you can talk to your person who's serving your community, who's a public servant, that they're obligation is to make sure that you survive and to make sure that your neighborhood is safe in a way that requires them to think about justice from different perspectives.
You know, as a country, really good at investing in hard power solutions and the hard power agencies of government. The military of the US is certainly prepared to deal with any conventional national security emergency. We have the world's largest prison system by far, and quite robustly funded police forces all across the country. What the pandemic shows is that we've been underinvesting in all of those soft power agencies that help us deal with homelessness, lower level domestic violence, poverty, evictions, housing, and our ability to respond to public health crises. So the way I think of defund the police means let's invest resources in the agencies that bring us together and that foster more equality and that provide kind of services that people kind of need.
Yeah, I agree with you too, because like you said, I think during this COVID-19, we really saw the disparities in those systems that weren't properly funded. And it was like at this one moment where we were hoping the light never shined on those public offices or those public servant organizations. And when the light shined on them, we really looked that they couldn't really handle the weight of America was in a disaster, of America was in the moment of a crisis. We didn't have the proper tools to really navigate through this, right? And I think like you said, defunding and reinvesting is important to I think what we're really looking at is restabilizing the foundation of America's morality and the foundation of the connection of the public servant to its community.